Welcome to the Pride of Detroit POD cast. We're back together once again. Had to bear ourselves a bit of a week. I was still here. Morgan steps out. We bring back the rest of the trio. Welcome. This is the Pride of Detroit POD cast. PrideofDetroit.com. Pride of Detroit on Twitter. Pride of Detroit on Facebook. Live on Twitch.tv/Pride of Detroit. You really can't get the habitual talk out of the way. People who do this stuff, we get into a routine. Unless we have the routine, we throw everything off. Like I forget to hit the record button. Thankfully, I haven't forgotten to hit the record button because I did my routine this time. Because I am adequate. I am beyond adequate. I am Christopher Fett, the adequate host. If you've been with us long enough, you know what adequacy means. At Christopher Fett on Twitter. Welcome back. Thank you, everyone who's been following us. We have a hell of a free agency podcast to talk to. So very quickly, I'm going to bring in the two people who will be the majority of the talking because they need to get their takes out about what's been going on. Jeremy Reisman, the fearless leader at Detroit Online. Jeremy is back from his vacation in sunny, beautiful, sinking Florida.
Yeah, I think you can technically call it a vacation, but I think my family may differ from my version of a vacation to theirs.
Your habits?
I was busy. I was busy having fun and work hard, play hard. That's what it was.
I prefer not to work hard. That's why I decided to do sports talk. Joining me is, as always, also Ryan Matthews at Ryan_POD. Ryan took some time out of his busy life coaching track and field. I don't know what involves all that other than telling people just run hard.
Jump high too. I coach high jump too. So that's another important thing. I think what we figured out though over the course of this past week is while Jeremy has the Jersey curse, we are sending him to Florida for the first week of free agency every year. Yeah, like we're just going to like Kickstarter, GoFundMe, something. But like even if it takes like Jeremy taking a Greyhound bus to Florida.
Yeah, Jeremy, we're sending you to Disney World and you can't leave.
Those are the rules, man.
Hey, but here's the thing. When I came back on Sunday, things didn't stop.
I was going to say, this might just be Brad Holmes doing laser eyes right now, too.
Yeah.
The hype is off the rails.
Oh, it's crazy.
Beyond, the Kool-Aid is way too strong right now. But we need to break down how it got too strong. We have a 3-segment podcast for you here, and we have a lot to get to. Some of it's going to be ground me and Morgan already covered in the week, but I want Jeremy and Ryan's input on certain things that have happened. But let's start with the position that got the most reinforcement, and that is the defensive backs. They signed quarterbacks plural, including what happened last night. But first, do we start with CJ, or do you want to let's start with CJ Gardner-Johnson? Sure. Let's just start with the one that is brand new. Let's start with CJ Gardner-Johnson in an absolute coup. I was actually working at my other job with an Eagles fan when this news broke, and he was beyond unhappy. First, he was beyond unhappy that he left, but then he was beyond unhappy when he heard the price. 1 year, $8 million with 6.5 guaranteed. For a man who had himself one hell of a season last year, has kind of been seen as one of the better young safeties in the league, at a position where the Lions absolutely needed reinforcement. Jeremy, I don't think I saw this coming.
No. Considering it came at the end of the first week of free agency, I think a lot of people were like, okay, the Lions, they made a lot of splashes. They made 3 pretty significant signings, 2 at the position of need at corner and 1 at running back, and we'll get to all that. But yeah, I think there was a sense that they were done. I don't think anyone was circling CJ Gardner-Johnson as like, they could maybe still go after him and get somewhere. So yeah, a huge surprise. I think a really fascinating signing. He's a guy that I think maybe some people circled at the beginning of free agency is like, hey, Brad Holmes, and Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn know the guy. He's a versatile guy. He's probably going to play nickel here, I imagine, even though he had a really good season at safety with the Eagles, but he played nickel when he was with the Saints and with Aaron Glenn. And so now, I mean, I just, and again, well, I'm combining this with the other signings here. It's fascinating because we went into free agency, and I think a lot of people didn't like us saying this, that the Lions may not have had a starting cornerback on their roster. And the Lions clearly agreed because they filled all three starting cornerback jobs. And I'm not saying all three of those guys are necessarily going to be day one starters. There's going to be some training camp battles going on, but CJ Gardner-Johnson is definitely going to play, is definitely going to start. And the fact that he can play corner, nickel, the fact that he can play safety just means he's going to have more and more opportunities to be on the field. The Lions are going to make opportunities for him to get on the field because he's such a ball hawk, right? The one real downside to CJ Gardner-Johnson, and it'll be interesting to see how they use him, is that he's not a great run defender. He misses a lot of tackles. But given where this team's weaknesses were, which is defending the pass, especially in the slot, he's kind of a perfect fit. So pretty thrilled about that signing.
Yeah, the only point that I want to kind of circle back to is what Jeremy mentioned briefly was, a lot of people had this guy circled as there's connections, right? You go back to Dan Campbell in New Orleans, Aaron Glenn in New Orleans, and you connect the dots. But I think the point is so salient, Jeremy, that a week ago today, the Lions, for all intents and purposes, a lot of people were like, we don't know if they have a starting secondary at cornerback specifically, right? Like they have 3 spots that are ostensibly open. It's 1 week from that day, and all of those spots have been filled.
It's crazy.
And we're going to get to the other signings, but I think the way that I'm feeling about this and why Chris, said the Kool-Aid is overflowing is CJ Gardner-Johnson felt like the cherry on top, right? It felt like with the other signings that we're going to get to, hey, the Lions got 2 outside corners. They have at least some depth behind them now with guys that maybe we didn't feel so comfortable in Jerry Jacobs and Jeff Okudah being the starting outside corners. Now those guys are depth pieces. Oh, okay. The CJ Gardner-Johnson signing felt like Brad Holmes saying, okay, we're in this year.
Yeah. I was just saying, how validating does it feel that, like, for the past 2 or 3 weeks, everyone agreed, like, cornerback was a huge need, and we're all sitting here wondering, is this going to be the offseason where they attack it heavily like they did wide receiver last year? And we're like, I don't know, like, it sounds like maybe they're going to be less aggressive and continue to just do things mildly, and then, like, 2 hours in, everything explodes, and it's like, yep, they're doing exactly what I think we all hoped they would do, which is just attack cornerback.
Two notes from me. The first one is a very quick question to Jeremy. Just 1 sentence answer on this, because I know you said you're liable to see him playing nickel, but does the departure of Deshaun Elliott to the Dolphins maybe make you think like maybe the Lions try him out at safety, or like, I don't know, if the draft falls through, they don't get a safety they want or something? Because I think the safety is a position where they still need a little bit of help right now.
Yeah, it's a good question, because I do think safety is a big need. So I do think he can play there in some spots. Obviously, they're comfortable with their first 2, but also another guy we're going to talk about, Cameron Sutton, is also capable of playing a little bit of safety. So I think I think you're right. There needs to be a primary sole backup, and maybe they're hoping that Iffy is that guy, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was just asked about like a Tracy Walker tweet on the pre-show or something, so I was just kind of curious about that. But the note I want to make here, and this is maybe a theme we're going to get into with Sutton and Moseley as well, is that the theme on CJ Gardner-Johnson is also the theme of a lot of this free agency so far is, damn, my team X was really hoping to re-sign this guy,
right? And
the Lions swoop in, sometimes at incredibly competitive prices where it's like, we couldn't, again, I go back to my Eagles friend, we couldn't sign CJ Gardner-Johnson for just $8 million. We couldn't do that. Like, I think it speaks to just the job Brad Holmes is doing this offseason, being not only targeting good players, but being very economical about it. Like,
yeah.
I haven't looked at the full cap yet, but this has been fantastic.
Yeah, we don't have 100% of the contract details with him. There might be a situation where they added a void year to kind of spread out some of that money. But it the Lions were kind of fortunate. They swooped in after the Eagles and Gardner-Johnson didn't agree to a longer term deal. And whether you believe his agency and the tweet that they sent out that it was a completely backloaded deal, that he probably wasn't even going to see most of the money in year 3, if that's true, then Gardner-Johnson probably chose the right contract anyways. But and the other thing about CJ Gardner-Johnson is that you want to talk about dogs, right? You want to talk about guys who are aggressive, guys that are shit stirs, for lack of a better word. Like, Lions are going to have a mean dude on their defense, and I feel like they haven't had, like, who's a guy on their defense that is just like a guy that's going to like get in the mud and tear things up, guy that's going to give a little attitude. You know, when we look back to the one good year of this Lions team had as a defense in 2016, they had a lot of those guys that can piss off the other team.
Yeah,
and
in 2014, yeah.
2014, that's right.
Yeah.
And now they have one of those guys in CJ Gardner-Johnson, which is nice. I like it. I think they've been missing that.
Ryan, let me open up the other signings here, because the other two, in case you're catching up or you missed the ones with me and Morgan that we did, Cameron Sutton, 3 years, $33 million, 22.5 guaranteed. Emmanuel Moseley on a 1 year, $6 million. How are these signings really shaking up the cornerback room? What I think you guys kind of hint toward, like, we went into this without thinking the Lions really had a CB1 and a CB2. I feel like this shakes things up, but also, like, what was your reaction to both of these signings? Like, where do you see Sutton and Moseley kind of like fitting in here?
Yeah, I mean, I see them firmly as CB1, CB2. That's your guy on the left, and that's your guy on the right. Like,
Jeff Okudah has to fight for a spot.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think that here's the thing: the Lions, ever since Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have come to town, we talked about it when there was a little kerfuffle that was much ado about nothing, to borrow some Shakespeare, but about Jameson Williams, right? When we were, hey, what did that little line about accountability and holding up your own, and what'd that all mean? Well, that just meant, are you going to come here and do your job? Because if you are, you're going to be rewarded with playing time. The Lions got two guys who have clearly, they've done it. Like, Cam Sutton has done it. Like, last season, he did it. One of the stats that Next Gen Stats that NFL put out, Cam Sutton allowed just 32 receptions on 72 targets in 2022. His 44.4% completion percentage allowed was tied for the fourth lowest in a season since 2016. So they got a dude who can play outside corner and who can cover in Cam Sutton. And that's why and I said this when the Lions signed him, they paid a premium for him, because while he's a guy who has done it, he did it for a year, but he did it at a really high level. So I love the signing. I love them being aggressive. I love them saying, hey, we are deficient at cornerback. We are going to stock the cupboards with cornerbacks. They went out and did it. And that's what I love about it. So for me, these two signings on the surface just say, we got guys who are going to come in and they are going to play now. And Cam Sutton, he got paid that way for a reason. But I want to kick it over to Jeremy for whatever he has to add about Cam Sutton.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's such a perfect fit. One thing that a lot of these signings in the secondary do is just open up the possibilities to be a little bit more flexible. Guys that can move to safety, to nickel, to outside. Cam Sutton is one of those guys right there, along with Gardner-Johnson. And so that allows them to do more. But more importantly, and this is all the feedback that I got from Steelers fans who were just absolutely heartbroken that they lost this guy, is he's incredibly smart. And the one thing that we, over the past 2 years, have struggled with in the Lions secondary is miscommunications. A really young roster that can't communicate with each other, that don't see the play developing. Cam Sutton is one of the more cerebral guys, defensive backs in football. And so you talk about a guy who can be a leader. I wouldn't be surprised to see this guy captain. Week 1, this guy steps in and is immediately a captain. I think him and Tracy Walker are going to be side by side, so important to just the leadership of the entire defense, not just the secondary room. And so to me, that is the biggest thing with Cam Sutton. And listen, he's good at zone, he's good at man, he's good at off coverage, he's pretty good at press. It's not his best suit. He's a little bit small for that. And that to me is also kind of a surprise. A couple of these guys that they've signed are under 6 feet, and I think we're used to seeing, the trajectory of NFL being these 6'1", 6'2" guys. But if you got a dog like these guys, it doesn't matter. And they know where to be. Again, maybe not the most athletically gifted, but what he lacks in size and speed, I think he makes up with just in football instincts and intuition. And so having that sort of guy in such a young cornerback room and secondary room, I think that's going to do wonders. And so I think he's worth the premium. He's not Jalen Ramsey paid. He's not 18, 19, 20 million, but 11 million years is an investment. And I wasn't sure whether they were going to make that sort of an investment in the cornerback position. I sure was hoping they would, because I do think cornerback is a premium position in the NFL today. And so I'm glad they spent premium money on a premium guy.
And I think if we can shift the conversation to the last big signing that they made in the cornerback room, I thought this was one of this. I think this was the most Brad Holmes signing of maybe any of the signings that he made in free agency. It was a 1-year deal for a guy who has shown a lot of promise, and that's Emmanuel Moseley. Like I think it's such an interesting signing that they went out and got a guy who, again, if I can throw another next gen stat at you, he has recorded a pass defended or an interception on 18.3% of his targets over the last 4 seasons, the 4th highest ball hawk rate among outside cornerbacks since 2019. He's behind 3 other guys that you would consider pretty darn good at that: Trevon Diggs, J.C. Jackson, and Xavier Howard. He's in pretty elite company as far as the guy who, again, like you mentioned with C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Jeremy, ball hawk, dude who just sniffs out the ball, finds it, makes plays. This is another guy that they got who does that, and they got him on a 1-year prove it deal, which is just the most Brad Holmes thing. Last year he has the ACL injury, kind of the market for him. Who knows if somebody was willing to give him more years or more money or what, but the Lions were the benefactor of finding the right player at the right time and bringing him in. This is one of the more intriguing signings to me, because like I kind of said, and Chris was like, well, does that mean Jeff Okuda's riding the bench? Like, it might, because they got some dudes who can play.
Yeah. And Moseley again fits that model I'm talking about, where you were talking about proven deals. I'm sure San Francisco would have loved him back too. But for whatever reason, the Lions in their negotiation have been able to target players that seem to be big with fans and big with media. I don't know if that's always a good thing, but it seems to worked out here. And I think the other thing too is these guys are all fairly versatile too. I haven't looked at their full snap counts, but I think I forget which one it is, Moseley or Sutton. I know one of them has taken snaps at slot.
Sutton, yeah. Sutton,
yeah.
Sutton does it a bunch. But yeah, with Moseley, he's also 26. He's about to be 27, so young. And yeah, this is, I think a lot of people compared this to the DJ Chark signing last year. You could go back a year and call it the Tyrell Williams signing, where it's a guy coming off a serious injury, 1-year prove-it deal. If it works out, great. Maybe we re-sign you next year to a more significant deal. The Lions have shown that these 1-year deals, while they don't always work out, when they do, the guys get paid, right? We saw it happen with Charles Harris. We saw it happen in the past with a lot of these guys. This is a place where you go to get a second chance at your career. Kaminsky, right? Bugs, whatever. All these guys are getting a second chance, and it might be with Detroit. It might not be. You might sign somewhere else. And I feel like that's the way the Lions have been operating this entire time, right? They're not re-signing any of their guys until that Monday negotiating period opens up, and then they're like, okay, go find a deal. If it's better than ours, maybe we'll match it, maybe we won't. If it's not better than ours, come on back. Either way. And so I can't say that's necessarily a big factor in a lot of these guys coming in and doing these 1-year deals, but I bet some of these agents notice, and it's not out of the question, I think, to see what the Lions are doing and to see some of these guys that do have to prove themselves in one way or another look at Detroit as an opportunity to rebound their career. And with Moseley, I don't know if he's going to start right away. We still don't have the contract breakdown of him, which I think would be some valuable information. We just know it's a $6 million deal. We don't know how that's broken down. You have to imagine there's probably some built-in bonuses there with playing time because he's coming off the ACL. Sounds like he's not going to be ready for OTAs. Timeline, though, seems like he'd probably be ready for training camp. But I think I'm with you, Ryan. I think I'm not giving him a starting role right away. I think there's going to be a training camp battle. I think they're going to treat it like they treated the linebacker position last year, a bloodbath, right? Except with a lot more talent than they had at linebacker. That Jerry Jacobs will be in there, Jeff Okudah will be in there. Yeah, and there's always a chance they move one of those guys. I'm not putting it out of the question that Jeff gets moved. I would have said it's probably not happening yesterday, but now that they had, because we talked about maybe Jeff Okudah moving to nickel or moving to safety. I don't know about that anymore, and I don't know about. I mean, it's a hefty contract. You might be able to get a team to be like, maybe we can fix him. He's a first round talent. Maybe he just needs a change of pace. Maybe he just needs a new set of coaches. Maybe you could hook someone into that. I'm not putting it out of the question, but at the same time, I kind of like having an embarrassment of riches in depth and being like, if Jeff Okudah is CB5 on this team, that's great. Like, I know you don't want to be paying $10 million for 1 year on CB5, but at the same time, cornerbacks get injured a lot, and to have a guy that you can somewhat trust come off the bench, there are worse problems to have.
It's an interesting thing, and just one word. I'm really holding you to one word on this. Does this take cornerback off the board for the Lions in the draft?
No.
I don't want to just say one word. The answer is no.
Just to say it.
Because
see, that's easy. No.
There's no one.
They're short contracts. Yes. Okay.
Yes. There you go.
Okay.